Remember when airports felt organized? You would arrive early, check your bag, move through security without tension, and maybe even sit down with a coffee before boarding. Terminals felt structured, predictable, manageable, built to handle the flow of travelers without overwhelming them. Gradually, that balance began to shift. Passenger numbers climbed beyond what many terminals were designed to accommodate. Connections grew tighter, and lines stretched longer than anyone expected. But in 2026, things have grown even more strained. Travel demand has surged yet again, while infrastructure and staffing haven't expanded at the same pace. Some of the world's busiest airports are operating closer to their limits than ever before. And what used to feel like minor inconvenience now often feels like systemic pressure. So the real question is, which airports are quietly becoming more stressful to navigate and which still manage to deliver structure and control despite the volume? We ranked 15 major airports across the United States and around the world, focusing on congestion, transfer design, operational flow, and overall passenger experience. And let me tell you, starting at number 15 is a name that will shock you. Or maybe it won't. Number 15, Newark Liberty International. If you've ever connected through Newark, you don't need a survey to explain the experience. You land, check the clock, and immediately start calculating how fast you can walk. The gate changes. The corridor feels longer than it should. The security line stretches far enough to make you question your timing. Even when you arrive early, there's a strange sense that you're already behind. Newark has become less of a gateway and more of a test of endurance. Congested northeast airspace, frequent delays, weather stacking on top of tight scheduling. When disruptions begin, they rarely stay contained. They ripple. Inside the terminals, space often feels compressed. Boarding areas fill before announcements even begin. Moving between terminals can feel less intuitive than expected, and connection times that look reasonable on paper can suddenly feel optimistic in practice. And perhaps the most telling detail is this: there are people who live within comfortable driving distance of Newark who deliberately choose other airports. They'll sit in additional traffic or book a less convenient route simply to avoid the unpredictability. Not because Newark doesn't function, it does, but because the experience often feels heavier than it needs to be. Newark moves millions of passengers every year. It keeps the system running. But few major U.S. airports generate this level of collective hesitation, and reputations like that don't appear by accident. And what about you? Was your experience at Newark anything like the one I just described, or totally different? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your experience might help another traveler avoid a frustrating trip. And now let's move to an airport that nearly escaped the bottom spot, but this time it's located in Europe. Number 14, London Heathrow. This airport runs like a machine that's constantly one step from overheating. It runs on tight margins almost every single day. And when an airport operates that close to its ceiling, even small disruptions feel amplified. A slightly late arrival narrows connection windows. A gate reassignment stretches an already long walk. What looked comfortable when booking can turn into a calculated sprint across terminals. Distances matter here. Transfers often involve lengthy corridors, escalators, underground trains, and occasionally another round of security screening. The layout makes sense on paper, but under time pressure it can feel relentless. One traveler quipped that finding your next gate at Heathrow feels like a scavenger hunt, but without the treasure. It's funny because it's not entirely wrong, but one flaw frustrates travelers more than almost anything else: the security bottlenecks. Heathrow has been slow to fully roll out next-generation scanning equipment across all terminals, and during peak hours that delay becomes painfully visible. Lines snake around corners, tray shortages slow the rhythm, and inconsistent procedures between terminals leave even experienced flyers second-guessing what needs to come out of their bags. It's a system originally built for yesterday's passenger volume trying to cope with today's demand, and under pressure, that gap shows. Heathrow remains powerful, connected, and globally essential. Yet when an airport runs this close to its limits, the experience becomes less about elegance and more about endurance. If this list has surprised you so far, consider subscribing so you don't miss what's coming next. And now we move to an airport that looks architecturally impressive from above, but on the ground, navigating it can feel like solving a puzzle you didn't know you signed up for. Number 13. Paris Charles de Gaulle. From the air it looks impressive, almost sculptural. Curved terminals, sweeping glass, a layout that feels designed as much for aesthetics as for aviation. It carries the weight of a capital city and one of Europe's most important international gateways. The complication begins once you start walking. This is not an airport that reveals itself easily. Terminals divide into subterminals. Gates branch into letters, then numbers, then additional corridors that seem to lead somewhere definitive until they don't. A connection that looked straightforward when you booked the ticket can quickly become a chain of escalators, shuttle buses, underground trains, and another round of security checks. Time moves differently here. Even seasoned travelers sometimes hesitate at signage. The directions exist, but they often require interpretation. You follow one sign, only to discover that your gate has shifted to another wing entirely. Moving between certain sections can feel less like transitioning and more like relocating. One traveler once described it this way: CDG isn't confusing, it just expects you to think in layers. It's a polite way of saying that intuition doesn't always help. To be fair, when connections are generous and everything aligns, the system functions. Flights depart, transfers happen, millions move through successfully each year. But the margin for error feels thin. When your inbound flight lands late or your departure gate changes, the layout amplifies stress. Distance becomes pressure. Architecture becomes friction. Charles de Gaulle is not chaotic in the way some overstretched airports are. It is organized, just not always in a way that feels immediately human. In a city known for elegance and clarity of design, this airport can feel unexpectedly abstract. Number 12. Frankfurt Airport. Everything at Frankfurt feels deliberate, structured, procedural. You sense it the moment you step off the aircraft and merge into the passenger flow. The signage is clear, the pathways defined, the system orderly, but the experience can feel less welcoming than it is efficient. Frankfurt is enormous, and the distances are not theoretical. Moving between certain gates requires long walks through industrial corridors that seem designed for throughput rather than comfort. Terminal changes can involve buses, trains, escalators, and additional screening. The layout makes logistical sense, yet under time pressure it can feel relentless. What appears manageable on a booking confirmation can become physically demanding when the clock is running. Security and passport control add another layer. Procedures are consistent but rarely flexible. The process works, it just doesn't bend. During peak departure waves, lines build quickly and move methodically rather than swiftly. There is little chaos, but also little softness. The system prioritizes structure over flow. That rigidity becomes noticeable during tight connections. A slightly delayed arrival can trigger a chain reaction of walking, queuing, and rechecks that leaves minimal breathing room. Unlike airports that feel confusing, Frankfurt feels controlled. Sometimes to the point of friction. It remains one of Europe's most important aviation hubs, moving enormous volumes of passengers with disciplined coordination. Aircraft arrive and depart with precision. Operations are rarely theatrical, but the scale and procedural intensity create a different kind of stress. Not the unpredictability of congestion, but the weight of distance and process. Frankfurt doesn't overwhelm through chaos, it wears you down through repetition. For some travelers, that structure feels reassuring. For others, it feels mechanical. And the next airport on our list isn't defined by size or layout, but by unpredictability, the kind that can turn a routine travel day into a scheduling gamble. Number 11. Toronto Pearson International. The difficulty here isn't architectural confusion or endless walking, it's unpredictability. Toronto Pearson sits in one of North America's most weather-sensitive corridors. Snow, freezing rain, sudden wind shifts. The kind of conditions that don't just delay one flight, but dozens. When winter storms sweep across the region, schedules tighten quickly, and the ripple effect can stretch across an entire day of departures. Weather alone wouldn't define it. The strain becomes visible when operational buffers thin out. In past peak travel seasons, staffing shortages and high passenger volume exposed how quickly the system can slow under pressure. Security lines build. Check-in counters back up. Baggage handling struggles to keep pace when flights stack on top of one another. Pearson is a major hub, and with that status comes density. Domestic, transborder, and international traffic converge heavily during certain waves, which means a disruption in one area rarely stays isolated. A delayed inbound aircraft can cascade through connecting flights. A weather hold can compress departure windows into narrow bursts of activity. None of this means the airport fails daily. On clear days, operations can feel orderly and well managed, but the margin between smooth and strained often feels thinner than at some comparable North American hubs. The experience becomes especially tense during peak winter travel. Even travelers who plan generously can find themselves watching departure boards flicker as conditions shift. Toronto Pearson moves enormous volumes of passengers efficiently most of the year. But when volatility arrives, and in this region it inevitably does, the system's resilience is tested in very visible ways. Leaving the Canadian winter behind, we move to a gateway that sits between Europe and Asia, where flights from 3 continents converge under one roof. Any idea which airport it is? Number 10. Istanbul Airport. This is not an airport that unfolds gradually, it stretches. Long corridors run toward distant gates. Departure boards glow with destinations across Europe, Asia, Africa, and the Americas, and passenger flow moves in steady, constant waves. Istanbul Airport was built to be one of the largest hubs in the world, and it operates like it. That ambition is impressive. It is also demanding. Positioned at the crossroads of continents, the airport handles heavy connecting traffic almost around the clock. Flights arrive in banks, and when they do, the terminal fills quickly. Seating areas tighten, security lines swell, boarding zones grow crowded before announcements even begin. When timing aligns, the system flows efficiently. When an inbound flight runs late, the ripple spreads fast. Walking distances are not symbolic here. A transfer can require a determined pace through expansive concourses that seem to extend further than expected. Moving from one end of the terminal to another is not casual. It requires awareness of the clock. Layovers that appear comfortable on paper can feel surprisingly narrow once you factor in scale. Unlike some older hubs, the infrastructure is modern and signage is generally clear. The challenge is not confusion, it is magnitude. The airport's design reflects the city it serves: energetic, ambitious, unapologetically large. For travelers with generous connection times, it can feel efficient and well organized. For those on tighter itineraries, the size alone becomes the primary stressor. Istanbul Airport functions as a global bridge, and it does so at full volume. And at that scale, even small delays can feel amplified. And the next airport on our list is widely known for its infamous traffic loop, a curbside circle that's as recognizable as it is routinely congested. When it backs up, the delay starts before you even enter the terminal. Do you know the name already? Number 9. Los Angeles International. At this airport, the delay often begins before your suitcase leaves the trunk. The circular roadway wrapping around the terminals was meant to streamline arrivals and departures. Instead, during peak hours, it becomes a slow-moving procession of brake lights. Ride shares merge aggressively. Hotel shuttles block lanes. Private vehicles hesitate at the curb. What should be a 2-minute drop-off can stretch into something far longer, especially in the late afternoon and evening waves. Major improvements are underway. The automated people mover and expanded ground transportation plans are designed to ease curbside congestion and reduce reliance on the loop by 2028. Elevated tracks are visible. Construction zones signal change. The long-term vision is ambitious, but in 2026, much of that promise is still under construction. Traffic patterns continue to shift. Pickup zones move. Temporary solutions create new bottlenecks. The idea of a smoother arrival exists, it just hasn't fully arrived yet. Inside, the layout introduces a different kind of friction. The terminals sit in a broad arc rather than along a single streamlined axis. While airside connectors have improved, not every transfer is seamless. Some routes still require exiting security and re-entering another building. Distances that appear short on a map can feel surprisingly inconvenient when time is limited. Passenger volume remains heavy year-round, driven by domestic travel and major trans-Pacific routes. Boarding areas fill quickly during peak departures. Security wait times fluctuate sharply, depending on airline concentration and time of day. Nothing about LAX is small. The ambition is visible everywhere, but in 2026, the reality is transitional. Modernization in progress, congestion still present, and a curbside loop that continues to test patience long before takeoff. Number 8. Amsterdam Schiphol. Amsterdam Schiphol has long been known for clarity. One primary terminal complex, a relatively intuitive layout, and transfer routes that, at their best, feel straightforward. For many travelers, especially within Europe, it has often been one of the easier major hubs to navigate. That simplicity is its greatest strength, but it is also its vulnerability. Because so much activity funnels through centralized areas, volume spikes become visible quickly. When departure waves align or long-haul arrivals stack up, security checkpoints absorb the pressure first. Lines can build rapidly, not because the system is chaotic, but because the flow is concentrated. The layout works best when evenly paced. When demand surges, it feels compressed. The same applies to seating and gate areas. During peak travel periods, central zones grow crowded and personal space shrinks. Yet on calmer days, movement feels efficient and surprisingly calm for a hub of this scale. Transfers are generally manageable. Signage is clear. Walking distances are reasonable compared to some mega hubs. The airport's compact design can save valuable minutes when connections are timed well. At the same time, past staffing and baggage handling challenges left an impression that hasn't entirely faded. While operational stability has improved, consistency remains essential at an airport where so much traffic converges into shared corridors. Schiphol doesn't overwhelm with architectural confusion or endless walking. Instead, its experience depends heavily on timing. Arrive during a balanced window, and the flow feels smooth and logical. Arrive during a surge, and the same design can feel tight. It remains one of Europe's most connected gateways. But like many large hubs built around centralized efficiency, its comfort margin is narrower than it appears. Now we head to an airport so busy that when weather shifts in the Midwest, the effects rarely stop at the runway. A storm system here doesn't just delay a few flights, it can reshape schedules across the country. A reminder of how central this hub truly is. You probably already know which airport I'm talking about. Number 7. Chicago O'Hare International. Few airports in the United States carry as much weight as this one. Chicago O'Hare isn't just busy, it's central. Positioned in the heart of the country, it serves as a massive connecting hub for domestic and international routes alike. On a clear day, the operation feels like a carefully choreographed system, with aircraft arriving and departing in tight, deliberate sequences. But geography plays a role here. When weather moves through the Midwest, winter snow, summer thunderstorms, strong crosswinds, it doesn't just affect one runway, it reshapes the flow. Because O'Hare handles such a high volume of connecting traffic, delays rarely remain isolated. A disrupted arrival can cascade into missed departures, tightened connections, and schedule adjustments far beyond Illinois. The layout itself is expansive but logical. Terminals are separated yet connected, and frequent travelers often navigate it comfortably. Walking distances are reasonable compared to some mega hubs, and signage is generally clear. When operations run smoothly, O'Hare can feel efficient and purposeful. The challenge emerges during peak congestion windows. Boarding areas fill quickly. Taxi times on the runway can stretch. Weather-related ground stops are not uncommon during certain seasons, and because so many itineraries pass through here, small disruptions can echo outward. Still, O'Hare remains one of the most important gateways in North America. Its infrastructure is substantial, its route network enormous, and its recovery capability strong compared to smaller airports facing similar weather patterns. The experience here isn't defined by confusion or sprawl. It's defined by scale and exposure. When conditions cooperate, it moves with impressive coordination. When they don't, the ripple effect reminds you just how interconnected the system truly is. And that influence is precisely why so many travelers keep a close eye on Chicago's forecast. Number 6. Munich Airport. At first glance, Munich feels composed. The layout is structured, the signage direct, and the terminals are easier to read than many larger European hubs. Transfers are usually manageable, and walking distances are reasonable compared to sprawling mega airports. For many travelers, the experience feels calm rather than chaotic, but that calm depends heavily on timing. Munich operates efficiently when traffic flows evenly. During peak departure waves, particularly morning and late afternoon banks, security checkpoints can tighten quickly. Lines form faster than expected, especially when multiple long-haul flights cluster within the same window. The system works, but it doesn't always absorb sudden surges gracefully. The airport's size, while manageable, also means fewer buffers during disruption. As a major hub for Lufthansa and its partners, delays within one airline's network can ripple through connecting gates. If weather or operational issues arise, alternative routing options are not as broad as in larger, more diversified hubs like Frankfurt. Winter conditions in southern Germany add another variable. Snow and freezing temperatures are handled competently, but they still compress departure schedules when storms move through the region. Inside the terminals, seating near popular gates fills quickly, and during busy holiday periods, the calm atmosphere gives way to visible congestion. The layout remains logical, but comfort margins narrow. Munich doesn't overwhelm with complexity, nor does it struggle with the intensity of larger global crossroads. Instead, its experience sits somewhere in between, structured, generally reliable, but sensitive to timing and seasonal pressure. When balanced, it feels efficient. When crowded, it feels smaller than its reputation suggests. And this is where the tone changes. From here on, we're talking about airports that don't just move passengers, they move them intelligently. And we start with a hub so large it could easily feel chaotic, yet was built with a level of planning that makes its scale work in its favor. Set deep in the heart of Texas, with terminals arranged in sweeping arcs around a central roadway, it's a design that feels deliberate rather than accidental. Number 5. Dallas-Fort Worth International. Size alone doesn't guarantee chaos. In this case, it enables control. Dallas-Fort Worth is one of the largest airports in the world by land area, yet the experience rarely feels disorganized. The semicircular terminal layout, built around a central roadway system, creates a structure that is surprisingly intuitive once you understand it. Each terminal operates almost like its own ecosystem, but they remain tightly connected. The real difference lies in movement. The Skylink train runs airside, connecting all terminals quickly and reliably, which means long transfers don't automatically translate into long walks. Even when gates are far apart, the system absorbs that distance efficiently. For a hub of this magnitude, that matters. DFW also benefits from space. Wide concourses, high ceilings, and generous gate areas help prevent the compressed feeling found at older, land-restricted airports. Peak departure waves still bring crowds, but the infrastructure was designed with growth in mind. The airport doesn't feel like it's constantly operating at its ceiling. As a major hub for American Airlines and a central connector for domestic routes, traffic volume is substantial. Weather disruptions in Texas can still cause delays, particularly during storm season, but the airport's runway configuration and layout often allow operations to recover more smoothly than many comparable hubs. It isn't glamorous, it doesn't try to be theatrical. Instead, it works. DFW proves that scale, when planned deliberately, can feel empowering rather than overwhelming. Connections are manageable, signage is clear, and the flow of passengers tends to feel intentional rather than reactive. Number 4. Rome Fiumicino. Some airports improve quietly, others earn recognition for it. Rome Fiumicino has spent the better part of the last decade refining its operations, infrastructure, and passenger experience, and the results haven't gone unnoticed. From 2018 through 2025, it received ACI Europe's Best Airport in Europe award in the category for hubs handling over 40 million passengers, a distinction that speaks not just to aesthetics, but to consistency. The difference is visible the moment you enter. Terminals feel modern, open, and carefully organized. Passenger flow is logical, with clear separation between Schengen and non-Schengen areas. Security procedures are structured but generally efficient, and signage is intuitive without feeling cluttered. Transfers are manageable for a hub of its size. Walking distances exist, as they do in any major airport, but the layout rarely feels punishing. The airport has invested heavily in upgrades, including expanded retail spaces, improved lounge areas, and more streamlined passenger routing. That doesn't mean it is immune to pressure. Peak summer travel, particularly during tourist season, can stretch lines at security and passport control. Long-haul departure waves bring visible congestion near certain gates. But unlike airports that feel reactive under stress, Fiumicino tends to absorb volume with relative composure. There's also a noticeable emphasis on presentation. Cleanliness standards are high. Lighting and architectural finishes feel intentional rather than purely functional. The environment feels curated, not accidental. Rome Fiumicino doesn't overwhelm with spectacle or sheer size. It balances scale with comfort, and that balance is difficult to achieve at 40+ million passengers per year. Recognition alone doesn't make an airport excellent. Sustained performance does, and in that regard, Fiumicino has quietly set a benchmark in Europe. The next airport on our list rises from the desert skyline, runs around the clock, and sends fleets of A380s toward 6 continents without ever slowing down. Do you know the name already? Number 3. Dubai International. Few airports operate at this intensity around the clock. Dubai International never truly sleeps. Long-haul departures roll through the night, wide-body aircraft line the gates in steady succession, and transfer passengers from 6 continents move through its concourses at every hour of the day. It is one of the busiest international airports in the world, and it functions like a global interchange rather than a regional hub. The scale is unmistakable. Concourse A alone was designed specifically for A380 operations, and it shows. High ceilings, expansive gate areas, and clear separation between arrival and departure flows help manage enormous passenger volumes without constant friction. Movement is guided rather than improvised. As the primary hub for Emirates, DXB handles a heavy concentration of long-haul connections. Transfer waves are significant, yet the system is calibrated for that rhythm. Security and transit screening are structured for throughput. Signage is clear, and walking distances, while sometimes long, are predictable. Retail and lounge offerings are extensive, from sprawling duty-free sections to premium spaces that reflect the city's emphasis on comfort and presentation. The airport leans into its identity, polished, modern, and globally oriented. That doesn't mean it is flawless. Peak departure banks can still compress boarding areas. Distances between certain gates require time awareness, and during especially busy travel seasons, queues can form despite the infrastructure. But unlike airports that feel reactive under pressure, Dubai tends to feel engineered for it. Its design anticipates volume. DXB is not subtle. It is bold, expansive, and unapologetically international. For travelers making long-haul connections, particularly between Europe, Asia, Africa, and Oceania, it offers a level of operational consistency that matches its ambition. From a hub that runs at full volume around the clock, we now move to something very different. An airport where efficiency is almost quiet, movement feels measured, and even at peak hours, the atmosphere remains remarkably calm. Number 2. Tokyo Haneda. Not every great airport needs to be loud about it. Tokyo Haneda operates with a kind of quiet precision that becomes noticeable almost immediately. Even during peak travel periods, the atmosphere rarely feels chaotic. Movement is steady, lines form, but they advance with rhythm rather than urgency. Announcements are clear but not overwhelming. punctuality is one of its defining strengths. Japan's broader transportation culture places enormous emphasis on timing, and that discipline extends here. Aircraft departures and arrivals tend to follow tightly managed schedules, and operational adjustments happen with minimal visible disruption. Cleanliness is another distinguishing feature. Floors, seating areas, restrooms. The attention to maintenance is consistent. It's not decorative luxury that stands out, but care. The environment feels maintained rather than simply used. Haneda also benefits from proximity. Located significantly closer to central Tokyo than many large international airports are to their cities, travel time into the heart of the capital is comparatively short. That convenience adds meaningful value, particularly for business travelers and short stays. Transfers are generally structured and clear. Signage is direct, and passenger routing rarely feels confusing. Even in international sections where volume has increased in recent years, the flow remains measured. That does not mean Haneda is immune to congestion. Peak departure banks can still tighten security lines. Long-haul gates may require longer walks, and space, compared to sprawling global megahubs, is more compact. But the difference lies in execution. Where some airports rely on scale to absorb pressure, Haneda relies on discipline. It does not overwhelm with spectacle or retail excess. It does not dominate with architectural drama. Instead, it delivers consistency. In an industry where unpredictability often defines the experience, that quiet reliability stands out. From quiet precision, we now move to an airport that many consider the global benchmark, where indoor gardens, natural light, and even a waterfall aren't luxuries, but part of the standard. It's a place that has redefined what travelers expect from a terminal experience. Ready to see the winner? Number 1. Singapore Changi Airport. At the very top of this list is an airport that consistently gets the fundamentals right. Singapore Changi has become a benchmark not because of spectacle alone, but because of consistency at scale. It handles tens of millions of passengers each year, yet rarely feels strained. Movement is fluid. Signage is intuitive. Security and immigration processes are structured to minimize friction rather than create it. The design is deliberate. Natural light, indoor greenery, and open architectural spaces reduce the sense of compression common in many global hubs. The Jewel complex, with its indoor waterfall and garden environment, is not a decorative afterthought. It reflects the airport's philosophy that travel can be both efficient and pleasant. Transfers are smooth, with clear routing and manageable walking distances. Cleanliness standards are meticulous. Seating is ample. Even during peak departure waves, the atmosphere tends to remain composed rather than hurried. What separates Changi from other major hubs is not one dramatic feature. It's integration, operations, passenger comfort, retail, dining, and transportation links work together instead of competing for space. The airport feels curated rather than improvised. No airport is immune to delays or seasonal pressure, but as a complete travel environment, Singapore Changi consistently delivers what others promise. And that's our ranking. Now I want to hear from you. Which airports surprised you most, and which ones would you have placed differently? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Real travel stories often say more than any statistic ever could. If you enjoy breakdowns like this, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next one. After all, in the world of air travel, sometimes the runway isn't the most unpredictable part of the journey.